Thanks, Declan, for that warm and flattering introduction. I will be putting Dale on the spot this morning. I think it's always a great opportunity when there's a real-life case study in the room, just to learn vicariously through their experiences. And obviously, our focus today is mental health. But, healthy body, healthy mind, as the old saying goes, which is really important, obviously, in our environment. And with that in mind, I thought I might just start off in relating a little bit of a story. We go down to the St Kilda Sea Bars, and the players have a rotation where they get in the seawater, in the ocean. Obviously, it's pretty chilly at the moment, and they go through the bars environment, and they see our physios and our myotherapists and get some treatments. And I pop in. It's an opportunity for me to finalise selection and talk to our chief of our medical area, Chris Bell, just to make sure that the boys are pulled up all right from the previous day's training session. And I wandered over to one of the massage tables, and big Tim English, who's 206 centimetres, is lying on his back, and Sarah Hassani, one of our physiotherapists, is manipulating his right hip. So he's lying back, she's manipulating his right hip. And Billy Gowers, who's a new Western Bulldogs AFL player, he's manipulating Tim English's left hip. And I thought he was getting a little bit close to the groin area. Now, I haven't got a homophobic drop of blood running through my body, I don't think anyway. So I thought it would be an opportunity to be a little bit funny and connect with Billy. And I said, geez, mate, you're getting a bit close to that, to Tim's groin area. We might have to buy you a rainbow hat. He said, what do you mean? What do you mean a rainbow hat? I said, well, Australia's craving, the first AFL player to come out. He said, what, as a physio? So I actually told that one of the players, to the players before training one day, and got a little bit of a chuckle at him, but Billy's a bit of a character. Now, I've got a couple of slides up here. Part of my mandate was to talk about my leadership, and but really I think we won't spend a lot of time on that, and feel free to ask questions along the way, especially when I get Dale up, obviously. Part of my my mandate is obviously to educate, and it dawned on me during my studies a long time ago how powerful imagery is. And we look at a lot of vision, obviously, to educate our players. Most of our learning is done physically, obviously, through training and building skills in our players. But these three essential things. Now, we use Keynote, so we're on a Mac platform, the coaches, so I've just squeezed this into a PowerPoint. So I've lost my animation, so forgive me that there's no functionality here. But these three simple things for me are things that I commit to being consistent with. Right, so exploring capabilities, and that means exploring the capabilities of our staff, in particular our players. And we become quite a versatile team, and in that statement, what I'm saying is see the good in people. It's not what they can't do, what are they capable of? And quite often, players will hit a bit of a roadblock, their form's not so great, there's a need elsewhere, we explore it with them. Sometimes you've got an oversaturation of role-type players, and you need to maximise your opportunity with your talent, and you move them elsewhere to see what they can do. Likewise with our coaches and some of our other staff, building skills into them and giving them the best opportunity for their future, not only at the football club but maybe elsewhere if a more senior opportunity arises from a coaching perspective. So it's staying consistent with that. Dale's probably one that stayed in the back line for most of his career. We sat on a plane together a long time ago, and he told me how his dad used to take his stats, still does, and he used to get his 40-odd play as a midfielder as a junior, but we haven't squeezed him into our midfield as yet. Equality in care, so that's pretty much no segregation. 44 players on a list. You can imagine sometimes there can be a bit of a hierarchy. Dale, as Declan mentions, played his 250th game. Was that 2 weeks ago, wasn't it? 2 weeks ago. So from a seniority perspective, Dale's held in significantly high regard. And from Dale right down to first-year players who are yet to establish themselves in the game, we try to make sure that they're all cared for as evenly as possible, and they feel like they're important. Whether it's our last rookie picked or it's the captain of our football club, Eastern Wood, our resources have to be devoted evenly to make sure that they feel like they're given the best chance to succeed. And the care element of that is obviously critical. I'm going to put up a slide in a minute that shows some bubbles where our resources really are quite extreme. And so we're pretty lucky. When I walk out here today, you'll say Beveridge is lucky. It's got a lot of resources, a lot of support at the football club to help people succeed. And tolerate mistakes. And, in our world, a skill error or a decision that's a bit marginal can cost you a game. And in totality, it's hard to really, it's hard to quantify something in isolation, but there's pressure there, and the way that we react and act around those mistakes, whether it's a supportive or a judgmental take on it, can really foster relationships or it can fracture them. And we pride ourselves mostly as a coaching staff to be consistent in this, and let's move on. And in the 2016, when we achieved the ultimate success, we were a pretty good defensive team that year. We were in the top 4 or 5 as far as defending opposition scores, yet offensively we were below mid-table. We weren't as effective as we needed to be. We created a lot of opportunities, but we didn't necessarily capitalise on those from a scoring perspective. But I think it was our behaviours around that. Our players were encouraged to take risk. We wanted to play a certain way, and they knew that they had the support of the decision makers behind the scenes. And coincidentally, and I suppose incidentally, that final series we became not a prolific scoring team, but an efficient scoring team. It started to happen for us. And it was because our players stood up under pressure, absolutely. But it was also because they had that support behind them that they knew that they could rely on at quarter time, at half time, at three-quarter time. As a coach, as one of their mentors walked up to them, they knew that the conversation was going to be about the next quarter and what we could achieve, not what we didn't do so well prior. So consistency around that is absolutely important. And we're going through this again where we're not a great scoring side. It's linked to many dynamics in our team, but we have to stay consistent. And obviously I've got the Assassin's Creed picture up. Any Assassin's Creed readers or fans in the room? Anyone? Yep, up the back. Yep. I was quite horrified that Ezio Auditore didn't really get a significant mention in the movie, mate. But I think unity, all these behaviours foster unity amongst our operational area, and it's really important as a platform to to give us every chance to succeed. So, in relation to my leadership, leadership is complicated, isn't it? I mean, I look around the room and every one of you are leaders in your own way. There's something that you do that influences people, and that's leading. I love the word authentic or authenticity. It's a good word. And I think it's important from a leadership perspective to just be yourself, the best version of yourself. And effective leadership is leading through action and words and combining the two. And quite often I think the best leaders are empathetic or sympathetic to others and have a caring nature. I consider myself one of those types. But it's knowing the balance of the care and the discipline, especially in an elite sporting environment. And it's quite difficult at times with the new generations and finding that balance, especially on the discipline side. I mean, coaching has really evolved. And from when Dale started, and was Rocket your first coach? Rodney Eade, even compared to me, compared to others, and how it has evolved. But that balance is really important, and it's probably more on the care side and the empathetic side than it ever has been. And mainly because of the pressures of the game and how that can affect our players from a mental health point of view, whether it's a clinical problem or it's just the struggles of dealing with the pressure and performing at the best level that they can. But my probably throwaway is a great quote from Truman. It's amazing what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit. And as leaders, that's a difficult ideal to stick to, because we've all got egos, and ultimately we've all got careers as well, and building those careers depends on success sometimes. But the rewards and recognition programs that you probably have, that you'd have in your own areas, your own entities, they're quite critical to acknowledge the contributors. And I think we did that really, really well historically, to acknowledge all the people who influenced success at our football club. And people felt like they were rewarded publicly and in our inner sanctum. And it's built a strong cohesion and strong relationships in our organisation. And that starts with me, obviously. And ultimately they want to pin the success or the failure on someone. At the moment they'll pin the failure on me, and I'm okay, I'll take that. When they want to pin the success on you though, you have to distribute the credit. Because factually, the credit belongs to others. You're just a mouthpiece, or I'm just a mouthpiece. So that's really important. I love that Truman quote. You've got many. If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen, others. But that's his best one. So it's a pretty obvious statement about well-being. You read that up the back? Yep. Okay. Before I bring Dale up, in industry, in commerce, we work hard and we talk about balance. Hopefully you've got a healthy and happy family life. Not all of us have. Hopefully you've got strong relationships with your peers, your friends, you've got support. Hopefully you've got outside interests, hobbies, sports you may play, gym in the morning or afternoon, things that round you out, that provide balance, and sometimes even distract you from the pressures of your labour, of your daily routine. Where kind of the flip side, where sport is our livelihood. So from a welfare perspective, our focus is, especially with our players, is to make sure their balance is that they've got an ulterior work or academic focus, setting themselves up for their future, because Dale's had a long shelf life comparatively, but a lot of our players have got short careers, and there's a lot caught up in that. Some of them dream to be players, and they can fall pretty hard if it doesn't happen. So when they first come in, our players, we turn our mind to how can we round them up from a life experience point of view? How can we accelerate what they may do post their AFL career with hardly any time, because they're full-time athletes. So it's an ongoing challenge, but it's a significant focus for us. It takes the pressure off to a degree, especially when they're injured and not actually playing. They haven't got performance to leverage off. We've got a welfare manager named Brent Prismal, who oversees this side of our business. And obviously these two areas are not mutually exclusive. I mean, they're obviously interdependent, and we fight constantly to stay on top of both. And this one obviously is seems to be priority one, has been for a long time. But as we're talking about the right-hand top bubble there, we've run into some challenges that we never thought that we would. And I think it's great that Tommy Boyd's talking publicly about his mental health struggles. I don't know if you're across that in the room. So he's come out of the game last year for most of the year, dealing with some depression, some anxiety, some panic attacks, and he's spoken publicly about his struggles. And it's a very, very difficult thing to understand from a coaching point of view, and obviously from a workplace point of view, where there's almost a definite timeline here when they may be back. But this one here, will they be back? If they come back, will they be okay? How can we support them? And I said to Lisa Stevens, our psychologist, Lisa, tell me about Tom. I mean, what are his chances? Because this is over last pre-season. Trying to understand, Lisa's got an enormous amount of experience, has been such a great support for our players. I thought she'd know. And she gave me some confidence because of her understanding and her experience. But it's disconcerting, and I think we all feel it. So I might get Dale up. Come up, mate. Thanks for volunteering, for being forced by me to come up. Are you going to stay there? Yep.
I'm safe here.
So I think it's important that if you've got any questions, just stick your hand up and ask as Dale's going through some of his experience. He's had obviously, how many years in the game now, mate? Is it 16, 15?
14th season.
14. Yep. And he's going to play his 15th next year, and we hope, there may be some more after that, who knows. But most of Dale's injuries have been impact or collision type injuries. He's blessed genetically. His parents have put together a pretty fine specimen, so he's soft tissue wise, he's been pretty sound. Soft tissue obviously being, he's had, have you had any muscle or tendon injuries in the past?
A couple, but nothing major.
Nothing major. So Dale's going to talk to you a little bit about a couple of his injuries that kept him out of the game for a while, and his experience historically and the challenges he faced, and how that's prepared him in recent times to do it better. So I might just hand over to you, mate, and obviously you've got all these bubbles up here, which are some of our resources. Some of them are quite common for you in the room as well, but we've got others. There's Union, that's a coach who offers welfare support as well, and there's others around here. This is the one I say, see the player, but see the person. And make sure you care for the person and not just a player because they're a resource or a tool for you. All these bubbles here, see not only the player but the person and care for the person. This one here, because of their commissions, I'm not sure they care for the person all the time. They're always after their dollars, mate.
Mine does. Mine cares for me.
Yours cares for
Yeah.
you.
But no, thank you for having me. Like Declan said before, I've just started my work experience at EML. This is my second time here, so I'm a 35-year-old work experience kid, which is great. I get to feel young when I come into EML, and then I go back to footy. I'm a 35-year-old fossil, so I get the best of both worlds. But unfortunately, over my career, I have suffered some significant injuries. Mum and Dad did a great job putting me together, but didn't give me enough milk, so I kept breaking bones. I've broken 9 bones, had 5 operations, and missed about a total of 80 games over my career because of these injuries. But as Bevo said, a couple of these I'll touch on have been quite significant, and I've learned a lot about myself and about how the club can manage not only me but other players in the future better coming back from injury. And back in 2011, unfortunately, against Essendon, a teammate of mine, Easton Wood, went up for a spoil and came down and landed on my leg, on my right leg, and broke my tib-fib fracture down there. Both bones completely snapped. And in 2011, I thought, that could be career-ending. As it happened, the emotions going through your mind are unbelievable. You've obviously got your physical injury, the physical pain, but mentally I was all over the place. But I'm lucky enough to be at a very caring club. But even back then, we didn't do things quite the way that we probably should have, and we've learnt a lot over the years. So during this time, you get the initial injury when your world gets put into chaos. You're spinning. It feels like you're free-falling, spinning out of control. And from there were processes already in place at the football club to look after me physically and mentally. As it happened, the player welfare manager at the time rings my wife straight away. And that's all that I was worried about, my wife, my family, how are they? I wasn't too concerned about myself. I wanted them to be okay. But all these processes were in place already for them to look after me as a person, not just as a player, and my family involved. So my wife gets the phone call that I've broken my leg. Didn't go down too well. But then from there, she's able to start planning and preparing, which is the main thing with an injury. But this was quite a significant injury, and there's a lot in it, so I'll keep it as short and as simple as possible. But from there, I went to hospital. I had my leg put back in place with no operation. The doctors actually manipulated my leg, put it back in place, and I was in a plaster cast up to my hip. And I was basically wheelchair bound for about 8 weeks. 4 of that was in the cast up to my hip. And at this time, my wife was heavily pregnant, and we had my eldest Riley was 2 at the time at home. So there's a lot of stress at home, as you can imagine. Finally get home, lost all of my independence, lost all my capability of doing anything myself. A lot thrown on my wife. And you look at the support network here as a player, I had everybody reaching out to me. Let us know if there's anything we can do. The throwaway line, give me a call if you need anything. And I took that all on board, but you see all these connections from the player. I probably didn't handle it as best as I could. It was almost, I didn't reach out to them. They were reaching out to me, and I wasn't reaching out to them. So we took it all that we could do it ourselves. I'm a footy player. I'm big, I'm tough, I can look after myself. I can do all this on my own, we'll be fine. So we did that, and I did that. Turns out it was a pretty bad decision. My wife went into early labour. We almost lost our second child, which if we had have, I'd never forgive myself. I get a bit emotional about it now, as you can tell talking about it. But that was all because I was too proud as a person to actually let myself be vulnerable and reach out to others. And it's the biggest thing that I learnt in my time of being injured was to break down those barriers. To break down the barriers, I'm a big tough footballer, but I need to show vulnerability. I need to be able to reach out. I'd never spoken to a psychologist before, and at the time we didn't have one at the club, so that support wasn't there. We've come a long way as a club, and now we have that psychologist, but at the time it wasn't there, and I could have really done with it. But I probably wouldn't have reached out to it because men don't talk to psychologists, we don't show feelings, we don't talk about feelings. Why would I do that? So I didn't reach out, and it put a lot of stress on my family and friends that were close by. So that was a big learning experience. Fast forward to this year, I experienced another significant injury. Partially tore my ACL, again, in my right leg. My right leg's copped a workout, but partial tear of my ACL. They're the three dreaded letters every footballer doesn't want to get, the ACL. We didn't think it was going to be that bad, so I went in, had some scans, spoke to the surgeon. They are testing my knee, and they said, "Sorry, Moz, you've done your ACL." Again, straight away, world spinning out of control. What's happening? What can I do? Am I going to be able to play again? So much stress, so much pressure, instantly. And this time, I was able to handle it better. This time, I understood what was happening, and I knew the questions to ask. And the people around us, our club doctors, were huge during this time. Positive, filling me in with all the information that I needed. Everything that I needed to know about the injury, they told me right there and then. Zimmer was super positive, that positive psychology, which I do anyway, but even at this time, I was starting to doubt. But surrounding yourself with positive people goes a long, long way to getting you back sooner. And Zimmer and Jakey were fantastic in this. And if you go around to all the support networks here, I reached out to them just as much as they reached out to me this time, and I was able to handle it and manage it a lot better. My wife was able to handle it and manage it a lot better. My wife was in on the conversations a lot more than in 2011. Our player development, our player welfare manager, Brent Prismal, was huge in this area. He wasn't only communicating with me, he was communicating with Jem, my wife, because he knew what I was going to say. No, I'm fine, I'm okay. And he would go and he cared about me so much, and we have the process in place now where they contact family members. And my situation's different. I've got a wife, 2 kids, a mortgage, school fees, all that stuff. The stress and pressures that an 18-year-old doesn't have. So the process and the plan that is tailored for me is different for a 18-year-old kid. So Priz would ring my wife and make sure that everything is okay at home. Make sure that she is okay, and if she needs anything, because there's more to just the player here than just me. There's my family, my wife, and everyone associated. So we've learnt a lot and grown so much over the years where it's not just about the player, it's about the person and their family. And that is comforting for me to know that the club cares about me so much. And during my rehab, I had access to Lisa Stevens and our club psychologist. And the biggest thing about Lisa, and the one thing that Robert Murphy, our ex-captain, was able to instill in this group was it's not weak to see a psychologist. You don't, because we're men and we're big and tough, we can talk about our feelings, we can talk to psychologists. He stood up in front of the group, said, "How many guys talk to Lisa?" A couple put their hand up, and then he put his hand up. And he said, "Yeah, I see her. Does that make me weaker than you?" No, not at all. that makes me stronger. I'm not afraid to come out and talk about my feelings. I encourage you all to go and talk to Lisa. And then from then on, she's been booked out. So he's made her quite busy, but that was because I didn't put my hand up. I thought, I don't need to see her. Who really needs to see a sports psychologist? I was like, oh, Robert Murphy sees a sports psychologist. Geez. And then the way he was able to break that stigma about psychologists and feelings and how you're meant to be feeling mentally was a huge barrier just destroyed right then and there. And from there, we've been able to grow as a group. And during my rehab, it gets tailored for me as a person and my injury. Nick Stone, who does a fantastic job as a rehab coordinator, put together my program and was able to tailor it to the nth degree on what I needed. But not only that, I was informed every step of the way. He was there telling me why I'm doing things, and that's the biggest thing that I've found is everyone needs to know why things are happening. If you've got the purpose and the reason why to do things, you'll do it. You'll do it to the nth degree, with everything you've got. But the support network at the club had just grown significantly where I can go to work and I'm surrounded by the physios, the doctors, the rehab coordinators, the conditioning staff. They all told me to spend a week away from the club with my knee. I spent 2 days and I couldn't wait to get back to the club. I rang them and begged them to come to the club because the support network at the football club is what I knew I needed and I wanted. And not only from the doctors and the physios, but it were the players. When we have a soldier go down, injuries, we can't wait to get them back to put our arms around them. The amount of phone calls, text messages, emails, well wishes and support I had from the players, the coaches, everyone here, and it extends to the whole football club. It really made me want to get back. And so without that support from the player to the players and the player wanting that support, I definitely wouldn't be able to come back. So I'm a very lucky person to be part of such a caring club, and I can only talk from my experience at the Bulldogs, but it's an incredible place to be a part of, and when you're injured, you can really feel them take care of you as the player, but more importantly, as the person that you are.
Thanks, Miles. Some of the people that Dale just mentioned, Nick Stone, Nick's part of our return to play support group. So when a player gets injured, he goes into a different program. He's on a different weekly schedule to everyone else, and which is sometimes challenging because it's some earlier mornings as well. But we have this new tailored approach to bringing the player, the athlete, back to peak performance. So we're really lucky, aren't we? I mean, Moz has learnt through experience how to probably manage the use of those resources available to him better, and even to have that learning experience. Obviously, as the clock ticks on Dale's career and all of his teammates' careers, it's important that they do that. But I understand the challenges, as case managers or whatever your domain is that you face. But basically, they go into, say, a Nick Stone working with them physically in the gym on different apparatus, on different disciplines to bring the strength back up. A dedicated physiotherapist in someone like Shane O'Sullivan, making sure there's treatment and new diagnosis as the injury progresses. Lisa's readily available for a chat. Brent Prismal, who's our welfare manager, also doubles as a skill acquisition one-on-one coach. So he's out there kicking with you when you can do that, and handball. So we're blessed, aren't we? We don't know how we stack up in relation to the other 17 clubs, but we're fortunate. So with Dale still out here and even having a look at some of those bubbles, I think it's maybe, a good idea to throw to you if you've got any questions, or even if you want to make any statements. Even things like having other teammates in the rehab group with you as a support group. working together in rehabilitation, coming back to full strength. That's a bonus. You know, most individuals don't have a fellow worker trying to, get back to the workplace with sometimes similar injuries, and similar timelines. It's a luxury we have that especially at our club, there's always more than one in the rehab group. There's about 20 at the moment. And so there's other opportunities, and considerations, I think, in industry, but it's all time, money, capital. It's people, isn't it? And it's enabling that sort of approach, which is pretty challenging. So understand that. But we come here today, and Dale's telling you how good our support network is, and in a sense, I suppose, feel a little bit guilty because you can't access all these things in your environments and your focus as readily as we can. If we've got 44 players you need to take care of, in a national competition that's well funded, well resourced, and we're really, really lucky. But maybe there's some learnings here if we can invest or find a way. So has anyone got any questions or want to make any statements of Dale or myself in relation to this, or whether it's the leadership side of it or whatever it may be?
There's a couple of things with that. The first one was thinking I could do it myself, and thinking that we can handle this, and probably being too proud to ask for help. But it was also feeling like I'm a burden for others with the injury, which I don't want to put on anyone else. And I thought that I was just being that burden. If I was asking all these people to help me, that's, they'd roll their eyes and go, again, you need more help. And over the years and learning so much, I could see that the reach out for help was genuine, that they genuinely do want to help. And I'm not being a burden, because I've done the same thing for others who are injured and drive them around, and they have that same guilt that, sorry for asking you to do this. And I was no different during this time. But breaking down that barrier of thinking that you are a burden and that people, don't want to help you. They genuinely do want to help you. You're not a burden. You're part of the team. They care for you. That's why they want to do it.
When Tom Boyd was struggling a bit with mental illness, I'm sure you're aware of that before the rest of the team was aware of that. How do you manage the morale of the team whilst keeping a player's confidence, keeping them positive?
Do you hear that question up the back? It's a great question. And publicly we won't make excuses for performance, but you can imagine how connected the playing group are, and they really do care for each other. And so our players go out in sympathy quite often. There was a game in my first year in 2015 where it was a game, I think, where Clay Smith did his knee and Jack Redpath did his knee in the same game, I think, was it? No. Wally broke his leg, yeah, and Jack Redpath did his knee. We were 9 goals up, and we lost the game. So at half time, Wally was in the room, Mitch Wallace was in the room on a stretcher that the ambulance officers had got him on, and he was in excruciating pain. And Jack had done his knee, and we played amazing footy in the first half. And I'm in the room looking at the players, asking for, let's nail the Saints to the wall here, boys. We're 50 odd points up. Let's see if we can maximise our opportunity percentage-wise. And I can't remember my words, but that was little did I know that they were off the reservation. But Mitch Wallace's emotions
and his situation had such an impact on them that we virtually couldn't play in the second half, and I didn't realise it. And the Saints came over the top and won. Now, I tell you that story, off field with Tom, everyone goes out in sympathy. Then we're all trying to understand it because we're not educated. I spoke to the EML staff a couple of years ago, and I was talking about the first time anyone educated me on clinical mental health issues. And it was a young lady up at the AIS, and she put up a continuum, just drew a picture, and at one end she had, sad, and at the other end she had happy. And she mentioned how, quite naturally most of us can move up and down and have our own inbuilt mechanisms to do that, whereas people with clinical mental health struggles don't have them. They can't get back up to the happy situation. So even just that simple understanding, our players get some education off the Players Association, but internally we've had to ramp that up. We've had to try and understand it more. But Tom's situation, you don't only lose a good player, you lose an important person around the club, and it's that combination of the personality and the loss of performance that does have a sort of a trickle-down flow-on effect through the list and ultimately on performance. So it hurt us, and Tom's come back and played this year. He probably hasn't been at his peak, but he's played okay. And even when you're talking to Tom, what's that conversation like? Is that different to others because you're walking on eggshells? So the landscape has changed. But Dale and his teammates are extremely sensitive to the way that they're treated individually. Like if I'm quite stern with Dale about something, that will affect everyone else. Historically, I don't think it affected them as much. Like I can still remember when I played, and there was lots of animation in the way coaches went about things, and I think you're always worried that was going to be you, and you were concerned for your teammates, but we weren't full time. We all had jobs. Now, because this is almost like your second family, and we're all together all the time, it really does affect you. And the uncertainty around the mental health, as I mentioned earlier, is disconcerting because we don't understand it enough. And that's where Lisa's been tremendous in helping educate us. And if we just, quite simply, if we just stick to that mantra of our platform is support. It's not judgment. It's not, as Dale says, we don't sit there and become disappointed in people because we know what we're missing out on from a performance perspective. We've just got to accept it and try and work out how we contrive a victory in another way. And I think we've been pretty consistent with that. Not saying it's not a challenge, because it definitely is, because we're all built differently. Some of us can do it easier than others. And occasionally we have to remind each other, hey, it's not going to help, and keep others up. And that happens. That happens because we are human. Long-winded answer. Yes, mate.
Just wanted to ask you about, I guess, the onboarding of staff. It's quite important for a lot of organisations now. The immense pressure that a lot of the new recruits would deal with. How do you actually get them prepared for that?
What was the first? What did you say at the start?
So recruiting and onboarding. So
did you say onboarding?
Onboarding. So bringing them on. So bringing.
Okay. Yeah. No. Is that I haven't come across. I've come across the 20,000 feet helicopter view and the granular, but I haven't heard that one.
But I guess they do feel immense pressure in coming from the lower ranks to the AFL. It's quite competitive. Mentally, how do you prepare them for that?
Do you want to have a crack at that? Do you want to go? You and I are looking at each other going, I don't know, mate.
The thing with that is young guys coming in now are under so much more pressure from even when I started. And the reason for that is it's the thing in our pocket with all of that. You've got all this social media, everyone's got a video camera, everyone's got a camera. These young guys can't relax, they can't go out and enjoy themselves, they can't be them, just in case someone takes a snap, just in case someone films them. So they come in already stressed about this, and when I started we didn't have to worry about that, and whatever happened outside of the footy club didn't really matter, it didn't come back to haunt you. Whereas now they're under so much more pressure, and I think it links in heavily with them being able to take that feedback, and you can't go too hard at them because they are in an elevated state because of just life with all this stuff going on. But in saying that, there is so much education at the football club around managing not only yourself with the stress, but also that the thing in your pocket with all the Instagram, the Facebook, setting it up so you can still have a life, but the world's changed. So the education piece in that is a huge one.
Yeah, and probably two things. The AFL Players Association, which is the Players Union, they run an induction program for their first year of an AFL player's life, AFL life. And so some of the discipline, there's some social media education in that, and there's many others, some around finance and other things, how to manage your own affairs. But when we talk about this balance, now these young players have got a lot of time on their hands. Because as much as they're full-time athletes, but full-time isn't full-time. Because ultimately, our endeavours are to make sure they are right for 2 hours of footy. 2 hours of footy, and to get that right. So the physical preparation, the emotional hooks that we provide are all geared towards that. But in amongst all that, there is a lot of time off, and this is where some of those challenges are, with gambling and, as Dale said, too much time, from a FOMO perspective, and the pressures that come through social and the mainstream media that, yes, they can be educated on, but ultimately they're a victim of their own personality and their want to know and want to explore. So it's an ongoing challenge. But if we can fill up those gaps with other focuses, like what will you do after you're finished? Right now, is there an opportunity for you to take on a tertiary focus? Are there some opportunities in academia? And so we go down that track, and our welfare manager's really important in that. Does that answer you? That help?
Yeah.
Thanks, mate. Yes, mate.
And probably a similar flow on. I was actually going to say another element with young kids going through school and sport, resilience is a big word. Yet I also think there's an environment where we create for young kids where no one's a winner, everyone's even. And I read Tom Boyd's article, his point, and what really came out, resonated for me, was him saying, I had a pretty charmed, protected life, and I was very talented, so I didn't really face any challenge. And then I got to the AFL environment, which is challenges around every corner. So I was more going to say, similarly, the prevention space or screening, too, as well, what you're doing before they even break in many ways.
Yeah,
You probably just answered with the education.
Well, yeah, but I think, and because you read Tom's piece and his experience, and, he declared to the world that, hey, I've been fortunate, and my upbringing, I don't think, has prepared me for some of the challenges I've faced. I think part of it is too just that pride. We've all got a sense of pride, and our players, they're proud people, and taking on constructive feedback and how to improve certain areas, sometimes that takes time to get your head around it. Oh, he's not picking on me. This is for me, and this is to help me. And Tom had that sort of shield up, and now he's saying that he feels like it's come down. Even though we're sort of a little bit weary, you can tell it's come down. His demeanour's changed. He seems like he's happier. he's open to having those conversations that he probably didn't really want to have. So it's sort of learning a little bit through stealth, but that pride that all the players have sometimes can get in the way of progress, and then can manifest as a bigger issue. We face that all the time, and that's where we feel like regular conversations and making sure if you think that anything is not right, it's put that spot fire out straight away just by talking, just by grabbing someone and talking. And that's where players are getting better in instigating the conversation. Not all of them, but Lisa has been a really strong catalyst in all of that.
I think there's a different type of resilience in the young players coming through now. Different from when I started. I had Rocket as a coach, and he was named Rocket for a reason, because he could really give it to you. But back then we didn't have all the Facebook and Instagrams and the keyboard warriors. So any feedback we got was usually from the coach or your parents. But now with young guys coming through, they're subject to all those keyboard warriors where there's no ownership on what they're saying. They can type something and send it and forget about it. And the young guys have to deal with that every day, at home, at the club. It's always there. I've heard stories of guys getting phone calls and text messages, abusive ones. They're just flat out. Back when I was a kid, I'd probably fold then too, and I wouldn't know how to handle it. So there's a different sort of resilience in the young guys, but they're not used to the physical confrontation and getting the feedback and someone there saying it to them. But if Bevo was to text them during the game, I'm sure they'd get it pretty quick.
We have one more. I think you should play with you.
Just a question around building tolerance for mistakes. So I come from a business where our focus is around results and quality and getting it right is critical. So how do you sort of foster that in your in the team where you don't compromise, I guess, and become complacent around getting results, but also keeping that balance around tolerating mistakes?
Yeah, and no. In your vocation, are we talking about, because there's a risk management aspect to this, and understanding risk is important, obviously. Are we talking about significant financial losses if you make a mistake? Reputational, yeah. Context is important. Obviously, there might be more at stake, in regards to your industry or your business, and so it's all sort of, there's a mistake and there's a mistake. Our players, we can turn. I suppose what I'm saying is we can turn a skill error into a $10 million loss error. You know what I mean? In the way that we don't tolerate. So what I'm saying is that skill error, it's going to happen. There's got to be an acceptance. We've got to explore risk in the game and understand that we're going to make mistakes to get to where we need to go. It's a difficult one. It's not the same, is it? We're talking about two different things. So your tolerance levels and how you deal with those mistakes it is a difficult one for you and I to talk about right now, isn't it? Because it's just the magnitude of it can probably cost you you're talking about reputation risk, can cost you your place in the order, can't it? Because it's so significant. We're not facing that, so it's sort of all relative. I'm talking. So if it's massive financial risk involved, what we haven't got, you've got control, a control environment around decision making. We lack those controls. So because we lack them, we have to understand we're going to make more mistakes. There's going to be, and that tolerance needs to be heightened. I suppose I'm not encouraging less tolerance, but I understand that you'd be less tolerant. Because, you know, I don't want to compare oranges to apples. Yeah.
Perfect. We're allowed to make a mistake.
We're all allowed, as long as it's not a $10 million mistake. Can I just say thanks for having us. Thanks so much, Dale, for sharing your story. You're learning from those type of mistakes through obviously some injury and mental grind, injury issues and mental grind is extremely challenging. But we are fortunate and I suppose a little bit benchmark. If you've got any further questions, by all means, send them through and we'll be happy to follow them up.
Wednesdays, Dale.